If you are taking pictures, no flash photography, it'll scare the animals. And so you'll see in a minute what I mean. Okay, hey, I'm really glad to be here. Does this sound a little bit? Checking, 1, 2, a little bit better. Still a little bit. Okay, so I won't talk so loud. Maybe that was part of the problem. I am not a lecturer. I'm a discussion leader. And so if I say something that doesn't make sense, or please just raise your hand, just call out, because this will work much better as a discussion than if everybody just sits here and listens to me talk. Hey, we've got more seats over here. Just be careful as you cross the wire here. Don't want it to take you or me down, or my computer. There we go. Okay, so y'all kind of, those of you who were at lunch at the way too long panel, it was informative, but man, I felt sorry for you. Sitting there for that long. It was excellent, wasn't it? Yeah. Hey, I could sit there all day truly and listen to Stephen Kendrick and Jim McBride tell stories, so I'm in all day. Okay, so we're going to talk about getting money to make our movies, to make our shows, to write our scripts, etc. We're going to talk about all of that. I'm a huge believer in the power of storytelling to change people's lives and to change culture. It's really what I love to do. I'm convinced that the fundraising model for such and funding model is broken, in that most investors in independent film, and I'm going to make an assumption that we all kind of have something to do with independent film, meaning it's not studio funded. Most investors are one and done. They come in, they invest in a movie, and they're done. So I don't know how many of you, and it's because they lose their money, I should say that. It's not because they didn't have a good time. If it was just about the time, I'm sure they would hang around. In the financial world, there's something that's called venture capital. And it's when you invest in a startup business, and it's extremely risky. 70% of the time or more, you will lose your money. And then 20% of the time, you might make so much money that it pays for the other part if you're a good picker. Okay, movies are no different. So if you know somebody that invested in one movie, there's a 70% chance they did not get their money back. Doesn't mean they got zero, but they probably didn't get their investment back. And if somebody pitched them, hey, here's what we're going to do, and you're going to get, you heard me talk earlier, 20% return on that income, they probably got disappointed. And so a lot of it is just what people come in expecting. You know, what do you help them when they make that commitment? What do they think the rules are going to be? What do they think the return's going to be? So really what I'm going to talk about is just helping all of us as people who go out looking for funds understand the investor, understand what we're asking them. You're not going to remember all of this. I am glad to send it to you. I didn't have a means of doing that here, but if you get my card and send me a note, I'd be glad to send it to you if it's of help. So you won't necessarily remember it all, but hopefully you'll get kind of some pieces of the puzzle. And man, I had handouts, and they're not here. So if you get the, I'll send you the handout too. So, or I may have like 15 of them in my bag, and those can be the door prizes. 15 lucky winners get a handout. Okay, so with that, we're going to start down the path. Here are the goals. Leave with a better understanding of funding in the faith. I call it the faith/impact world. There's so many things you call it. In the old days, it was Christian movies. I tend to go with faith-connected projects. Some of those may be very overt. Some of them may not be. It all is included for me. I personally, my mission is to help make the world a better place. That's pretty broad, right? A lot of times it has faith content. I personally believe Ted Lasso helped people be kinder. And to me, if people are kinder, that kindness comes from God. And so it's what sometimes if you're Presbyterian, you might call common grace. Anyway, all that to say, what I'm talking about here are stories that impact the world for the positive, and you may have your own definition. So my point isn't exactly how that's defined. I hope to help you understand the types of investment into film, something called risk profiles, kind of types of investment, even dollar ranges, and then hopefully, as we leave here, help you begin to plan the fundraising for your next project. All right. A little bit about me. I am from Alabama. That may be an asset or a negative. It depends on where you come from. accounting degree, and then I also went to Vanderbilt. So I was in the music business early on. Amy Grant, Michael W. Smith, my favorite artist was a guy named Rich Mullins, and a lot of you are old enough to remember who Rich was. What an incredible person who was just way before his time, in my opinion. And he died much too early. In the video business, I worked for Bob the Tomato. Bob was my boss, and that was an incredible place to be, and what an experience. Film business, I think I said earlier, I'd been here in 2005. That was the first movie I ever worked on, was Facing the Giants. And I ran a company called Provident Films. They were our first real movie. And so I got to do a lot of the Kendrick movies. I hired John Irwin and Andy Irwin to do their first music video. Got to be part of a lot of their stuff when I was at Provident Films. Started my own company almost 5 years ago called Third Coast Content. Blue Miracles, the movie I talked about earlier. That was part of Third Coast. And I also have a company with Dennis Quaid. He has moved to Nashville. He loves telling stories that make people stand up and cheer, and I love helping him make those happen. And lastly, which really relates to what I'm doing here today, you may have seen at lunch, I do work with this group called the Impact Foundation. We'll talk a little bit about that, but that's using charitable funds into what we're doing here. All right, so I would say I have two core skills. One is to help creative people do what they do so they can keep doing it. I'm deeply affected by music, by film, etc. I just don't know how to do it, but I love helping people like yourselves probably who do it. I love helping you do it. And then I manage money in films. So running Provident Films, having a number of investors now, I see my job as to help steward that money in their films. So this is who I am standing in front of you today. All right, so let's do a little bit of terminology. Faith and inspirational films. I kind of tend to see them in three buckets. There's nothing absolute about this. You may have your own way of looking at it, but being able to discuss it with potential investors is probably helpful. Faith narrow. This would be overt faith content, usually has a conversion scene. Most of what Stephen and Alex do fits that. The thing they've got coming up later this year is not so much. It's going to be a bit faith broader. But faith narrow, typically, these are lower budget films. They're typically ministry films, don't have as much known talent, and they have lower budgets. And again, you can find exceptions to all these things, all right? But that's in terms of a broad bucket. Facing the Giants, God's Not Dead, War Room. Faith broad, more subtle faith content, probably no conversion scene, bigger talent, bigger budgets. Studios tend to do these. Soul Surfer, Heaven is for Real, I Can Only Imagine, etc. And then faith-friendly / inspirational. In other words, on the other end of the spectrum, no direct faith content, definitely have stars in them. Wonder, Remember the Titans, Blindside. Blindside had a reference to faith. I don't remember about Remember the Titans. Wonder, I don't think did at all. Anyway, that's kind of some buckets for you to operate in. When you talk to investors, you might be able to say, hey, here's my vision for storytelling. Here's where I operate. They may ask you questions. So just kind of a good beginning place to start. So let's talk about the audience. There's really a number of different ways people approach faith in the audience. There's some people, they only are going to see movies that have faith in them. That is their standard. They're not going to watch. And again, this is not subjective. I'm not stating anything good or bad. I'm just saying there are some people that are like that. Then there are people that say, hey, yeah, I like faith in my movie. That actually, if it's there, I'm probably more likely to go see it. There are people that say, yeah, I'm okay with faith, have my own faith, but not really what I'm looking for in movies. And there are people that if they hear it's got faith, they're staying away. So the important piece about this is just kind of know who you're trying to reach, because if you're trying to reach the faith-only crowd, this can be really important that your faith is really clear, right? If you think you've got a movie for everybody and it's got a lot of faith in it, may not be practical. So just the thought of thinking about who's my audience and what are they going to be looking for. All right, so why do people invest in entertainment? So now we're going to kind of turn this quarter and start thinking about, you've got a project, you're going to go raise some money. Why in general do people invest in entertainment? Most people will fit one of these categories. Actually, most people will fit all of the categories at some level, But again, understanding your investor and what they're looking for. One, people believe in the impact it can have, and these are not ranked. We'll actually talk about what we think the rank is in just a second. Honestly, impact through media can be expansive and worldwide. I think I told you about our Blue Miracle movie. 27 million people saw that in the first week of it being out around the world. If we were in theaters, that would never have happened. Or if we wrote a book, it never would have happened. So this idea of storytelling through film is huge in terms of the number of people we can reach. Tell a particular story. Sometimes you hear a story, you say, oh my gosh, people have got to hear that. It's usually a story about a person. They've done something great. It's inspirational. So sometimes people will invest in entertainment because they so believe in a story. You know, Mark Harper is a producer who is here. And Mark is telling stories about adoption and foster care. When he finds somebody who that's their passion, there's a better likelihood that they're going to invest in that story because of the message that it has. A lot of times people will fund, bless you, fund something because they want to support a friend or their family, right? Most people, I dare say, Kendricks are certainly like this. First thing they make is going to be funded by friends or family. Hey, it's the friends and family plan. That most often occurs for people with their first movie. And the last thing is just sometimes people think movie business is it's kind of cool. It's a sexy business. It's fun. Now, I caution you about those investors because if that's all they're in it for, it can be fun. But as we talked about, it can also be challenging. All right. So what do y'all think? Which of these, in terms of when you think of people that you might reach, what do you think is the strongest influence of people you know that might invest in entertainment? Say again? Yeah, so the impact and then a particular story. Okay, support the friends and family. Yep. So the key for you is knowing when you go talk to somebody, and if you don't know ahead of time as you talk to them, to understand what they're looking for. I will say from my vantage point, the ideal is they've got to have the double bottom line. Note that I didn't put in here because it has a big return. Sometimes I'll meet those people and I probably try to run away from them because it could end in a lawsuit. I want it to be meaningful beyond just the money investment for them. You know, you will never hear me tout to somebody, hey, we're going to double your money in a year. Not a good premise. But the idea of, hey, we're stewarding your money responsibly. We hope to bring you a return and look at this incredible story. Here's, how we think we're going to impact the world. Understand what's important to them. Okay, I'm going to say just a quick word about charitable funds. Sometimes investors, because of that risk profile, they may have, if you've ever heard of a donor-advised fund, some people have this. It's money they've already given, and it sits there for them to put into charities. Or they may just say, hey, I want to invest, but man, given the risk, at least I know I can get a tax break on it, all right? So it is possible. That's what Impact Foundation does. I told you about it earlier. So actually, as you set out to make a movie, don't think in terms of, it's got to be one or the other. Just know that's a tool that is at your disposal. That if I find somebody who wants to give through their charitable funds, then I can connect to Impact Foundation. Virtually all of your films would be eligible. It's about a 30-minute process for you to fill out information that's needed. You're going to have to do a lot of this work as you set up an LLC, typically when you make a movie, and I'm kind of not getting into the business affairs side. That's not the point here. But whatever you do to set up your LLC, Impact's going to ask you those kind of questions. So just, yep. Yeah, absolutely. Throw out the questions while we're here. Yeah, it absolutely can be used for anything. But remember that you bring the investor, all right? So Impact's not sitting there waiting on your project to come and decide, we like it. If you have somebody who says, hey, I want to invest in your project, all Impact needs to determine is, hey, this is going to have impact. It's pretty broad. And they'll then facilitate it because a normal person can't just give into a project and get a tax deduction and have it be a charitable donation. So does that make sense? Doesn't really matter what it is, as long as you have an investor that's willing to invest in it and that it's a project of impact. Yes? Yep. From what? They can absolutely sponsor, but they're not going to get a tax deduction as if it were a charitable donation in that case. As long as I'm assuming your movie entity, your LLC, is a for-profit entity. All right? If you set up as a charity, then you don't need them. So if you set up as a 501c3, no need. Make sense? Okay? Yes? I do. In this particular case, there would be a donor. An impact foundation becomes your investor.
So there is no ROI to them.
Nope. It comes back to they'll have an account at Impact Foundation. So if it makes their money back plus 20%, that comes back into that account. It can't come back to their personal side, but they can re-gift it. They could reinvest it, et cetera. So does that make sense? Yep, or give it to a charity. It'll just always stay on that side of the fence.
Is this for development as well as production?
It's for any of it. Yep, good question. And we are going to talk about development and such here in just a minute.
So they would not make a profit. They would just be able to use that money to invest in.
Right, their investment may make a profit, but the money won't come back into their bank account. It'll stay on that side of the fence, if you will, where they can still advise where it goes. Does that make sense? Okay. Y'all have asked really good questions. You're good listeners. Yes? When you say ORG, do you mean not for profit?
Yes.
Yeah. That's a totally subjective question. Depends on your project.
So do I need to register an LLC for the movie separate?
For the movie, you would set up an entity. So it could be this isn't going to answer that question necessarily, because it could be a nonprofit, it could be a for-profit. That depends on other things that we're not really going to cover in here, but I'm glad to chat with you after. It's going to end up with a lawyer, as so many things in life do, right? Okay, all right, we're going to keep going here. I love your questions. All right, so let's talk about the types of investing. And I'm sticking to a independent film model here. All right, it's really three parts. One's development, then we have production, then we have the marketing, which we tend to call P&A. We'll get into that in just a minute. Development is everything it takes to get ready to make a movie, right? Usually the first thing we think of is it's all about a script being written, right? So oftentimes we will pay a writer. Sometimes we have somebody who will write it on spec. They don't cost us, but let's assume we have a project. Let's assume we want to make a movie from a book. Okay, I'm going to make an assumption of, let's say it's $1 million movie. So it's not huge, but it's certainly not a $50,000 movie that we're making in our backyard, all right, or at our church, which are also very valid. So, and there are answers to those questions too. But for purposes of illustration, we're talking about $1 million movie. It's based on a book. All right, so we first of all have to go to the author or the publisher to option that book. All right. And an option means, hey, nobody else over the next 18 months can make a movie of this book, just me. And I'm paying for that right. I have the option to make a movie out of your book. It's an exclusive right. And that option, if it's somebody it may be low dollar, maybe $250 or $500. If it's a bestseller, it could be $100,000 or more. But again, we're making $1 million movie, so it's probably not a bestseller. And we're probably going to put out $1,000 for that option, something like that. Again, maybe more, maybe not much more. At $1 million movie, we can't put a lot of money into development. Let's say it's $2,500 and it's an 18-month option. And at the end of that 18 months, we have the opportunity to extend it another 18 months. Okay, that's oftentimes with an option. And at least that first payment of $2,500 will apply toward our purchase price. Because in that option, it says, if I make a movie, I'm going to pay you X for your book. It's probably a percent of the budget. And whatever I paid you for the option is going to apply against it. So if that's over your head, don't worry about it. Not important today. But if that hits you, makes sense, that's great. So we have an option. Then we actually have a script written. I got to do a deal with a writer. Right? Both of these things are going to require a lawyer. So having somebody that's a little bit experienced in entertainment, but not too expensive, is going to be helpful. asking other producers about that is probably a good way to find a lawyer. Find somebody that liked working with their lawyer. Find somebody that feels good working with you. You may decide after I got a script, now I want to have a budget done. I might pay a line producer and a first AD to do a schedule, first AD to do the schedule, and then the line producer do a budget. Like that's another common development cost. Then we're a little further down the road. We may want to go scout. Hey, we think we want to make this in Georgia. Let's drive to Georgia and go visit various places. All of these things are development expenses, okay? So risky money. If you're the development investor, the way you get paid back is if that movie gets made. Because in the budget of the movie will be all these things that we just spent. We'll have the money for the option, we'll have the money for the script, etc. And so if you're the investor and I'm coming to you and saying, hey, I need $50,000 because we're going to option this book, pay a writer, etc. Could be a realistic number, could be a little bit less. You're going to think, okay, do I think he can get this movie made? Because if I think he can get it funded and made, then I make my money back. How the movie does, irrelevant to the development investor, all right? And typically it's done as debt, and so you're just going to get your money back plus a return, 20%, 25%. Almost always the development investor is somebody who so believes in the project, they want to make it happen, right? Because it is the riskiest of the investments in the film world. Because so many projects get developed and don't get made, all right? So does that all make sense? Okay, and I hate that I went into all that detail without going to my development investment page. Raise your hand next time. Say, hey, do you have a page for this? Right, and we are going to have to pay those lawyers. I didn't point that out. You probably assumed. It is a high-impact investment. Okay, it determines, if you're a development investor, you're determining what stories are getting told. That's so high impact. Again, the risk gets paid back when the project is made. It's part of the budget. If it's not made, they don't get their money back. It's that simple. They're going to ask, will these producers get this movie made? I talked about generally lower dollar amounts. If I have a $5 million movie, like we've got something we're about to make for $2 million. We're paying the writers $25 up front. I'm having a budget done. We're going to make a visit. I'm actually going to go ahead and pay a casting agent before we greenlight the movie, so we can go ahead and put the pieces together to take out to find investors. So all of those, we've got roughly a $50,000 development budget on that movie. So, and I talked about it's debt with a prescribed return. Sometimes you may say, hey, and we're going to give you 1% of the profits of the movie. There are different options, but that's possible. Yes?
Do you find that people who invest in development do not necessarily invest in production?
I do have some investors that are like that. And it's their foundation, and they like the high impact piece. And for whatever reason, well, here's the other deal. The other piece is that, hey, for $50,000, they can help make this project happen. $50,000 into the production, is probably a very low percentage. So it's a lower dollar amount. It's a better entry level for somebody. So I'm gonna step out of everything we talked about thus far and make this one statement in terms of investors. Your responsibility, in my opinion, as the filmmaker, don't let people invest who don't have the money to do it, all right? That will get you sued, but even more than that, it's not kind to people, in my opinion. They may lose that money. That has to be the question everybody is asked. Can you lose this money? Because if they can't lose that money, they have no business putting it in a high-risk investment, and you should not help them do so. And I should not help them do so. I'm not preaching to you. I'm preaching to all of us. I see some filmmakers come around and, pitch it like the real estate deal, and people put their money in it and they lose it. So hopefully that just happens to really wealthy people who can lose it. Yes, ma'am?
Does it make a difference if there's a new actor when you present the proposal to the developer?
Meaning, here's the deal. If I'm the investor, I'm looking for everything I can see that tells me this movie will probably get made. And if you have a name actor, that's a feather in your cap, always. It's not often that at the development stage you've got that, because most actors want to read a script. They want to know who a director is going to be, et cetera. So that becomes more relevant typically as I'm raising production funding. Because typically I'm not, now if a director and an actor are, now here's a real life example, working on Charlie Pride movie. Anybody know who Charlie Pride was? Early African-American country celebrity. And the producer on that is Dennis Quaid and myself and a guy named Craig Brewer, who just directed a movie called Coming to America, the sequel, and Dolomite. Okay, they just sold his movie for $120 million. And so having those guys, and clearly Dennis is not playing Charlie Pride, but he's a guy in Hollywood who's been part of some big projects. That one's easier for me to raise development funding on. Hey, clear line of sight. These guys will likely get this done, you know? Now, if I came to them and I'm just me and I've never made a movie before, that's a harder. The person that's going to give me money, that's why it comes back to friends and family, okay? They know me. Yeah, we're willing to take that risk with you. So to your question, that's typically going to be more relevant at the production level, but absolutely always valuable. All right, that's development. Yes?
Where do you go to reach out for development funds whenever you know your friends and family don't have them?
Okay, so let's assume, let's say this movie was about, let's stay in the racism world. Okay, the Charlie Pride movie is not really about racism, but so if we go back to why people invest, okay, and we take out friends and family. So somebody wants to tell a particular story, we're going to drop out the fourth one too. Or they can have impact, all right? So really those things are going to kind of fit together. So if it's about a topic, I'd start looking for people for whom that topic is important, all right? And so it may be something that there's a group formed around, you know, and I just start meeting with people and asking questions because it's hard. This is a hard place. But typically the people that will invest in development, what you're doing matters to them. So it's either about you or about your topic. So that I think the way to think is, I got to find somebody for whom this topic is important. Does that make sense? Unfortunately, that doesn't easily solve your problem, but it gives you a starting place. Yes? Yeah. Nope. Oh, that's pretty good. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and look, the other thing you might do, like here would be an idea, is read about production companies, go read Hollywood Trades or Entertainment Trades, find production companies that might have made a movie about that topic, you know, and pitch it to them, you know. I make it sound so easy. It's not easy, but I think one of the great gifts of a producer, and I don't naturally come by this, is to hustle and to, hey, here's a person, and to have the confidence that while they may wonder, why in the world does this guy think he should be pitching us? You fully believe you should be there pitching them, you know, and you're unashamedly. Okay, the criteria, this was kind of simple, and I already said this. Criteria for an investor considering a development investment is this: one, they should always ask, is this a story I believe in and want to see told? Okay, you'll see this on every different investment. They've got to believe in it, or at least in you. And then they're asking this simple question: what's the probability this movie is going to be made? Producer, does he have experience, track record, talent attachments? You talked about that's an attachment. An attachment is anything like a director, talent, etc., actor that have now become part of the project. We're always looking for attachments. That will influence somebody's feeling of if this story will get made or not. All right, moving on from development. Production. Okay, this funds the cost of making the movie. This is, you know what this is. It's actors, it's directors, it's the budget. It's the cost of making the movie. The risk here, okay, before it was, does the movie get made? And this one, now we're making the movie, and the risk is what we call a performance risk. Will the movie perform? Will it make the money back? Will the money make enough money for the investors to be paid back? It's higher dollar. We talked about development, lower tens of thousands, maybe a few hundreds of thousands. Now we're into 2 million, 12 million. I will say that when a movie gets over 15, it's not as makeable as an independent film. All right. Now 15 to 25 is a little bit funny territory because studios aren't often making $15 million films, but they might, at least a bigger independent. Anything 15 and under, that fits a pretty known independent funding model. You got something that's going to take 50 million to make, you're probably going to studios to pitch.
Made-for-TV movies are about 15 million, aren't they?
They can be much lower than that. An average Hallmark movie is $2 million. So think about the level of stardom in them. That's usually going to be a pretty big indicator. And if you watch a lot of Hallmark movies, you've probably come to recognize those stars, but most people probably will not recognize them. So there's a little cheaper. I think, and there aren't many. Okay, let's define made for TV.
Gunsmoke, Return to Dodge. My favorite.
Okay, so where did that show? Yeah, so that kind of movie is rarely getting made anymore. Nowadays movies are getting made for streamers. And maybe some networks, but not really, not very often. Much of what's showing up on TV has already been somewhere else. And certainly streamer movies can, no different than theatrical movies. They, the whole range. Good question. Okay, it's higher dollar. It's not the first money in. Development was first money in, but now we've got raised money for our movie, and so development got paid. So now we're starting again, and this is the first money in. Pays for the making of the movie. It's first money in, and as we'll learn here in just a minute, it's the last money that gets paid back. Okay? So, hey, I'm in this for a little while. It's pretty high risk. Yes, sir. Okay, got it. And so it's risky. It's equity, which means they own a share of the profits. Okay? So oftentimes, this is how it should work. When the risk is high, the potential reward is high. All right? And so in this particular case, investing into your production, it's pretty high risk. But hey, if I bring our money back, let's use the example of, I can only imagine, $15 million movie, now actually $12 million movie. Budget, the marketing was probably another 12, so then about 25 in it. The theatrical one often made $80 million. Now, I don't know how well-versed you are at theatrical revenue, but an $80 million movie, theaters keep half or more. So that means 40 comes back to the distributor. Distributor's going to take 10% or 20%. So that 80 million box office probably became about 32 million to the Irwins. But because they'd spent, say, 25 all in, hey, everybody's already making money. Okay, that's an exception. But then you figure that went streaming, it went international, et cetera. So those investors, let's say you invested $1 million, you might have made 2 or 2.5 million back. You were into probably close to 2x or better on that movie. Exception, big exception. So, I'm not touting it as typical. I'm just saying that is, we get a higher reward potentially because we took higher risk. And accordingly, some people will get little or no money back. All right, so that's production investment. Let's talk about what the person's asking. Starts with, do I believe in it, want to be made? And then they're saying, do I believe the producer team can deliver a quality movie on time and on budget? What is the probability this movie will make money? Producer experience and track record. So if you're a first-time producer and you've got something that has some good potential, you may want a partner who's done this before, help your odds of raising money. Then we come back to that talent, attachments, story, other intangibles. This was written on a New York Times bestseller that sold 10 million copies. All right, my probability's up, right? A lot of people already know about it. So when I go market the movie, I'm not going to a completely cold audience. A lot of people already recognize it. This author has a bunch of fans already. Oh my goodness, Reese Witherspoon is attached to star in it. Okay, well, she's got lots of big hits. My director has had 4 movies that have paid their investors back. Those are all the kind of things. I mean, if you sit and think about them, you'll come up with more. But they're all things that as you pitch it, you'll say, hey, here's why you as an investor have a good chance, a chance of making your money back. And look, I don't get in front of an investor and sit there and bemoan how bad of an investment is. I just want to be realistic with them. Really, what I want them to hear is my passion for the story and how great we're going to make it. I want them to be proud of it, even if they don't get their money back. Okay, so that's production. Usually what happens if you put $1 million in, your deal is going to say whatever amount you put in, we're going to pay the distributor, we have to pay marketing, et cetera. That all gets paid first. And then the investors are going to get paid. They're going to get paid their investment plus 20%. Okay, typically. Might be lower. It's not often higher than that, but they're going to get some premium. And then the profits will be split with the creative side, which is the producers, the director, any actors, and the investment side will get half of the profits.
You ever taken account into like the inflation situation?
Okay, keep going.
If it's 20% from
Oh,
2 years ago.
yeah. Well, yeah, so a lot of that's going to, look, if inflation's 20%, then people probably aren't going to accept a 20% return, Yes, it's all about what the market will bear, What you want is a situation where there's more people that want to invest in your film than money you need. Then you got a competitive situation. And if I ever hear of that happening, I'll let you know. And do vice versa. All right, anything else on production? Okay, so let's spend a few minutes talking about marketing and P&A. Yes?
Once you have that production investment secured, that's when you pay back the development investors?
Yes. Now I've got a budget, and when it's all in, and with my investor, I may have agreed, hey, there's an agreement in terms of when we're okay to start spending the money, all right? So let's say I'm raising $5 million and you give me $1 million. I can't go spend that $1 million tomorrow because I don't know that I've got all the money to make the movie, all right? So our agreement's going to say at X amount, usually it's the full budget, should be. Sometimes people will say, hey, as long as you got enough to make it before post-production. But there's going to be some point that it breaks escrow, which is kind of a financial term if you're in real estate. But let's assume that this one says we've got to raise the whole budget. We raise the budget. We can then greenlight the film. That may also put other conditions. Got to have principal cast. There may be an investor who put half the money in and he wants to approve the cast. Okay, we want our investors to have as little say as possible. It's not because we don't respect what they have to say, but it's because it's not the business they're in. All right, and you don't need 10 people telling you what to do. All right, and so that's one of the challenges of independent film. You will occasionally have an investor that wants to be a little more active. Okay, now we're going to talk about P&A. First of all, anybody but Mark Harper, tell me what P&A stands for. Nope. Prints and advertising, yes. Yeah, it's an old movie term, and so that used to be a big part of the expense. Now it's not a part of the expense, but we do pay a virtual print fee. So they took the amount of money that a print used to cost, and now we pay that to theaters to help them recoup their cost of digital equipment. I think most of those dates are passing. Those agreements have expired, but somehow they're going to figure out how to keep that $1,000. I'm confident. But anyway, it's everything to tell people about the movie. All right, we make a great movie, and it never gets released or people don't hear about it. It's kind of for naught. So it's important. Very important. It is the lowest risk typically of investment because it's the first money that gets paid out. So if I make a great movie and I come along and convince you to put, let's say we got a $5 million marketing campaign and you put $1 million in, you're going to give me that. I've already made the movie. You have no risk of the movie turning out or not. You can even typically watch the movie. Okay, so no production risk. Now you're taking strictly performance risk and you're betting on, can this movie bring back $5 million to the producers? Okay, realize the P&A investors may make all of their money back. They make all of their money back plus a premium. It's usually 10, 15, even 20% before the equity investors ever get paid anything. So if you're my P&A investors, you guys put in $1 million, you've got your $1,200,000, and my $1 million equity investors over here have nothing at that juncture. Okay, now $5 million more dollars come in, they get all of their money, plus they're going to get profits. Eventually, they'll pass you if we have a big success, right? But that's why you're getting a smaller return. They're taking a bigger risk. Okay. Questions? Why? What's the criteria? always start the same place. They're going to want to know who the distributor is. Is it Sony Pictures? Is it Bob's Movie Distribution? And Bob may be a great distributor, so my apologies to Bob. How much are they spending and who's controlling it? Have these guys succeeded before? Bottom line, do I believe this movie can make enough money to pay back P&A investors? And I realize, I'm taking for granted something here, that as Christian filmmakers, much of what you do prayer will be part of it, wise counsel, etc. So please understand, today I'm really just talking about the logistic nuts and bolts of raising money for film. So, okay, so that's P&A. I want to give you a few ideas of what I tell investors, okay? Like if you ever talk to an investor that I've advised, here's what I'm usually telling them. Never invest more than you can lose, because you can lose it. Pick content and risk that fits your preference and tolerance. Goes back to believe in what you're doing. I always tell people to pick good partners. What's their experience level? What is their success, etc. And follow other experienced investors. If I can put money in, I know the guy that's investing next to me has already made money on 2 or 3 movies, I feel better about it. Okay, so again, first-time filmmakers, it's not that you're disqualified. You're going to have to figure out, how do you tell your story? Here's who my partner is. Hey, I haven't done it very often before, so we're really going low budget. Just help the investor be able to have some reason to think that you're caring for their money, that you've got a plan, and you've thought through the fact that this is a risky business. Then I always tell investors to diversify. Spread it across multiple projects. That's why if there's ever a film fund, and that fund invests in multiple projects, that's great for the investor. Okay, they've spread their risk. They're less likely to lose money. They may not make as much money as if they invest in one runaway hit. They won't. And then I encourage investors to have a philosophy and a strategy. Just come from develop their own strategy. So my encouragement to you is you may often get the opportunity to educate investors as well. All right? How do I say this nicely? A really generous but clueless investor isn't great for you. All right? They're more likely to be unhappy. They're more likely to not have a good experience. They're more likely to be one and done. And so I think we as filmmakers have some responsibility. At the end of the day, they're grown-ups, and we're going to assume, because we've checked it out, that they have the means to do this. But we want to help make a good experience for them.
Will an investor want to see some sort of sacrifice on the filmmaker's part, or like what is there?
So maybe. They may say, do you have any skin in the game? That's a common term. Look, I didn't have any money to invest in my first film, but I sure was giving it my life. So I think they may say. Now, my guess is, in the illustration I just used, where I was giving it my life, you can tell your story, Hey, here's everything I put into this. Chances are you'll already have money in it, I've spent these years, I haven't gotten paid. Because the producers typically aren't getting paid until the movie is budgeted as well. All right? If you're a really experienced producer, you may be able to charge a development fee. Okay? I don't charge a development fee. So I'm putting my skin in the game at that point. And so I may have been working on this project for a year or more. And then finally we get it budgeted. And even like I just made a movie. It's a great story. And we got 98% of the money raised, but we committed that we don't take producer fees until we have all the money in, until the movie's fully made. Usually your budget's got a contingency, okay? And so we were willing to say, we'll put our producer fees at risk because we so believe in this movie. And if we come in and we don't spend our contingency, then we'll have our producer fees, or if we find the final $100,000, so it's a low amount. Again, I never advise starting out on a movie you can't all the way pay for. And in this particular case, we knew we could pay for it with our own fees. But yes, that's the way in my opinion, that's how we as producers take risk. If you've got enough money to put in it, by all means. Now I really don't know. Okay, this is my education of to an investor. Always evaluate the producer. So again, that comes down to us. Build our own story. I'm a first timer, but here's why I'm investable. Talent attachments, who we talked about earlier, always key. Source material goes back to, is it a New York Times bestseller? Just is it a great story and people hear it, they love it. Distribution plan, how are you going to get it out there? Did you build financials? Do you have a business plan? All of these things, if you were investing in a business, you would be interested in seeing these things. These, while the producer instead of CEO, I mean, these are all just regular business items, all right, that people are going to evaluate. So that's how I help educate an investor. Yep, and that was it of those. Okay. You asked good questions. All right, so yeah, let's, and you can ask questions that are a bit broader than just these fundraising ideas. Yes, you were first.
Yeah, thank you, man. This is amazing.
Oh yeah,
There we go.
this way it gets on the recording.
Got it. Could you speak?
Okay, and I've even got it closed. See, I hate that. My battery runs out because of that. Do this. Take that. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Is there anything
I'm
interesting?
going to speak very transparently. So, first time out the gate, got a grad student film major to partner with me. Great experience. Got the money from family and friends, buddies, and no banks. And as an urban Christian filmmaker, there I was with rejection letters, and I thought, okay, I'm okay with it being a bad film, or could stand to have some better story, but I couldn't help wrestling with the idea when I saw the distribution companies like Provident and all these, Aspire Films.
Yeah.
I just thought, man, is it because I'm black? And I know that's not a place to start, but the enemy would have me think that. But could you speak to, when you go into diverse films of diversity, I know we hear a good story is a good story, but I often feel, just as an urban filmmaker, just the skin that I'm in, that God blessed me with, and being of the faith-based community, I can't, how would you tell me to get around that question of, if they're not into the culture, if they're not, like, how do we do that? It's not an even playing field. I'm sure you get the gist of the question.
Yeah, totally. I would tell you that right now in Hollywood, it's an advantage for you. All right? Now, in a white audience-driven business, it's not an advantage for you. So Stephen talked about War Room, all right? Okay, I told him I'm not sure that a movie about a black family can work with a white audience. I can't tell you how exciting it was to me that it did, And so here's how I'd view it. As opposed to making a conclusion that these people are making this decision because of me and my skin color, take them to audience, all right? Because they may feel like their audience is very white. Like, I get it. There's a rationale there. But history isn't proving that out right now. We have lots of successful movies that feature mainly black casts and come from African-American filmmakers. And so,
well, it's mostly the kingdom circle. It's like, there's a contemporary church and there's a different
it's an extremely white world.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And it feels like an extremely predominant one in the film world.
Yeah, so you're going to have to find the people that are more progressive. All right? I think that's the bottom line. We just made, Blue Miracle was predominantly Hispanic film. We have a movie, we're telling the Charlie Pride story. Now, look, one of the weird things about the Charlie Pride story right now is all three producers are white, And so our writer is African-American. So I guess what I'd say is these are issues that everybody should be wrestling with, And right now, there aren't a lot of people, and this is not meant as a negative, but there are just not a lot of people in the white evangelical world that necessarily are struggling in the same way. Okay? But I think they will come, and I think with filmmakers like yourself and other African American and other people of color, it's having to become an issue. So it's good. It's a positive. Okay? Good. That's a great question. Somebody over here had a question? Yes.
The director's meeting a little bit ago.
Yep.
And he made it sound like, boy, when you get down to the bottom tier, you're not hardly going to make money. It has to be just a really high profitable film. So what about streaming? I don't understand how you do make money in
Yeah.
streaming.
Yeah. Streaming deals can run 2 ways, 3 ways really. They can pay to have a movie made. And so if you're a producer with a movie, take it to Netflix, they say, we want to make it. Chances are they're going to take your budget and they're going to say, it's $5 million. They're going to say, we're going to give you $6 million to make it, and they're going to own it. Okay? So you will have your money on the front end. So if you invest in that movie, now honestly, at that point, that's just financing. That's not investing. If we've got a commitment from Netflix on the front end, and a bank may even do that. So that's low risk investment. But now let's say we went and made an independent film, and I've got investors of $5 million. Sometimes you just do a streaming deal, all right? So we're doing EST, it's called electronic sell-through. That's when people actually buy a digital version of the movie to keep. TVOD, TVOD, transactional video on demand, is when people essentially rent it. Going to buy it from Apple, and I get it for 48 hours, and it's going to cost me $6.99. And so your TVOD rights, your SVOD, that's your subscription video on demand, and then your EST, electronic sell-through, are 3 distinct businesses. Now, Netflix may say, we want it, like Blue Miracle, okay? They wanted it. They bought it outright. It became a Netflix original. We got no more money from it, okay? But our investors all got their money back. And a little bit more. With other movies, they may come and say, hey, you had a $5 million budget. We want the rights, the streaming rights, and they run in windows, all right? We're going to wait for 90 days. You get to do all of your TVOD and your EST, but then after 90 days, we want an exclusive period, and it can't be anywhere else. And then at that point, you go back to selling, and they get a window another year down the road, something like that. For that, they may pay you $2 million. So you've got to bring in your money through your foreign or through your other channels of selling, okay? That's why it's often helpful if we have a sales professional work with us. There are people that do this. And so finding a selling agent for your movie can be valuable because that's what they do. They're going to take 10%. So if they try to take more than that, then it's probably not somebody that you should work with. Did I help you? So it's the Wild West. Yeah.
There's plenty of people nowadays that if they look at the story, they don't really look at what color or who made it. If it's a good story, I've watched plenty of movies that were African American or Hispanic. If it's a story that really sounds good, I'm going. I don't care who made it.
Yeah. So finding the progressive people, absolutely, who have decided that, yeah. And progressive may be a bad word. I'm sorry if that's an offensive word. Let's just say, yeah, understood. I mean it nothing other than they've decided that they want to make inclusive movies. Yes.
Question. When you're running your operation, is it mostly all contractors that, I mean, of course the film is contract, but do you have like a overhead of office staff? Or are you pretty limited, or like you're running a company, but you're just running it real lean?
I'm just me.
Yeah.
And at other iterations, I might have capital that allows me to pay somebody else. Yeah, so I would say typically I need somebody helping me do something. And so if you were starting a company, I need a development partner. So I have a woman I work with, her name's Erin Miller, and we both put in our time and we develop projects together. I can't do it without I talked about that earlier today, development. I can't do it without a development person. And then I probably need somebody to remember details that I don't remember, like this option's about to expire, and if I don't send $10,000 to the rights holder, we may lose our investment.
Thank you. So in the music industry, distribution has become much easier, right?
Yes.
My husband and I have a music company, so I can send his music, get it sent to everywhere, right? Amazon, everywhere. Do you think that the film industry will ever get to that point where it is easier for independent artists to distribute?
YouTube.
YouTube.
I think we're there.
Well,
Yeah.
YouTube, yes.
Now the question is, can you get awareness? Because that's the thing, is I can get on Spotify with my music, and now all of a sudden everybody has Spotify. I mean, and most people know how to access YouTube, but they don't go looking for stuff on YouTube. So I'd say it's not as democratized yet, but certainly the walls have come down in terms of making things and in terms of giving some ability to people see it. And maybe it's a positive that there's nobody that owns it outright like Spotify and Apple seem to own. I mean, it's a great question. It's always the question of how can I get people to know about my movie?
Yeah, and I guess off of that, when you're talking to an investor, what would be, I guess, the best way to pitch that to them on how am I going to make that money back? Obviously, we're building up our own audience, and we're doing our own grunt work. But
Yeah.
are there different programs out there, or I don't know, someone just starting off? Where do we look?
First, I would build comps. Okay, meaning find some projects that have some similarity to yours in terms of budget, maybe in terms of new filmmaker. What did they do with theirs? Because chances are you're not going to have a definitive path of distribution when you make it. So come up with comps, because if I'm the investor, that's telling me, all right, he's thinking about it right. Now, you can't tell me because of that comp, you're going to do it. Don't guarantee it, but hey, here's some examples. So it can happen. It's like Dumb and Dumber. So you're telling me I've got a chance. If you saw the movie. But at least show me a path. So that's what I would recommend. Talk to as many people as you can. Learn of their experience. Events like this where other independent filmmakers are invaluable.
Could you speak, Ben, a bit to where we are with major Christian-based or faith-based distribution? It still seems to be the big six own all of the media.
Yeah.
And I know there's the Seven Mountain movement.
Yeah.
We're looking to take the helm. Could you speak to maybe?
Distribution is a challenge because Hollywood has a bias, right? Without a doubt. They're not interested in stories of faith. There are exceptions. Lionsgate has chosen to tell the Irwins, to do some things with the Irwins. Mark Burnett, Roma Downey have a deal at MGM. And they're Christians at various studios. And so it's not that it's without hope, but generally there is a disposition against things of faith. The Bible tells us that's going to be the case. Okay, we're not victims, not saying have adopted. It's just hard. Okay, so you're going to have to show them there's an audience for this movie. Here's what they've done before. I personally think that we've got to have a new avenue open up. And at this point, Lionsgate is talking about a faith-oriented streamer, potentially. PureFlix is there, owned by Sony. We all hope they'll put more money into content. Yeah, they're not indicating it so far, but maybe we can only hope. Okay. Yeah. And so very hopeful, very glad they've taken that step. Love the people at PureFlix. This is the last one, yes? Okay, keep going. Yeah, it's tough for that to become scalable, There have been some church exhibition, et cetera. Mark works on that a good bit, but it's tough. I would say right now it's not something that pays for a movie.
Hi. I am wondering, what is the best way to consistently and strategically find donors?
Okay, so that's a great question. That's kind of as we leave here, application. I think I would first of all hear stories from as many other filmmakers. Hey, how did you raise money for that? How did you, not that their path's going to be yours, but it's going to give you some ideas, all right? If you've got, then I go back to this idea, is it around a cause, Because if it is, maybe there's a way to start meeting people of that cause. Let's say that it's just a great story. Then I think I'm just going to start telling my story of, hey, here's what I'm doing. Look for opportunities to get in front of people. Speak at the Christian Worldview Film Festival and tell people what you're doing. Okay, I said that sarcastically, but look for opportunities to get in front of people. And maybe it is at your Sunday school class or a Sunday school class at church. They'll let you come in and tell about something you're doing. Where it's not a hard pitch, just start to put it out there. Because if we believe God's in control, tell our story and see who responds. You know, I'm a huge believer of that. If you're a potential investor, for me, I'm never going to give you a hard sell. All right? I want you to want to do it, not because I convinced you, but because you decided. God led you, whatever it is. And so that's what I'd say. Just start to tell your story. Okay? It's interesting how when we do that, we tend to find people that are interested. So, so-and-so told me you were doing this. I don't know how many times that has happened to me, but it's never the person I thought it was going to be. Okay? It's somebody, you know, their aunt or something. So that's a great question. That's what I would encourage you all. Start to tell your story. That's the beginning. Here's what I'm doing. You know, here's what I'm ultimately looking for. I'm looking for God to raise these people up.
Thank you. Let's give
Okay,
Ben
thank
a
y'all.
hand.
Hey, last comment. Yeah, please come down and ask me any questions. If I said anything that was bothersome, please come talk to me. Thank you all for being here.